Right, we're now joined via Zoom by Toby Fricker. He is the Chief of Communications at UNICEF South Africa to discuss the inclusion of children in climate change talks and COP27 holding its summit from today. A very good afternoon to you. Thanks very much for joining us there, Toby.
Thanks so much.
All right. Before we talk about the inclusion of children, I'd like to talk about what the UN Secretary General had to say. Antonio Guterres calling, in fact, on developed countries to accelerate from coal to just energy to help in the fight against climate change. Is this, just rhetoric? Do wealthy countries really sort of have this very high up in their sort of list of priorities? Because, one could argue that, it really is a case of profit and, what's profitable to these nations then, when we're talking about climate change, how important is it?
Yeah, no, thanks so much. I mean, let's face it. There are so many priorities right now for governments, for countries, for corporates. Is climate a big priority? I think what we heard in your report is yes, there is momentum, and that is one key thing. Look, let's build on that momentum. Let's look at the positives. Let's try and move on that. And from a UNICEF perspective, why is that? It's important because the climate crisis is, like we like to say, a child rights crisis. And let's not forget that. We didn't hear the word children come up in the reports earlier. And children are the ones who are going to bear the brunt of the crisis. It's here now, but in the future, that's really where we need to mitigate the impact of climate change, where we need to adapt. Mm-hmm. And that needs to bring in governments, it needs to bring in the private sector and everyone. And I hope that COP27, we hope as UNICEF that COP27 can help to move that momentum and keep things moving forward for the sake of children.
Yeah, you've already answered, the next question where I wanted to ask you if, children are being fully engaged on these conversations. So I think we can, in fact, say no, they aren't. So let me ask the next part of that question then. As the world is indeed engaging and finding solutions to deal with climate change, what kind of contributions are we looking from children? What exactly do they have to contribute to the conversation? Yes, of course, we understand that they are the future, and they're the ones who will be most affected by this. But what is the understanding from them of what exactly to contribute to the conversations of what is to be done?
Well, I think firstly, let me just recognise that children and young people have played a role in the South African delegation going to COP27. So we have 5 youth delegates who are there now, who are part of the delegation, who are having their voices heard and getting involved in the discussions, which obviously is really critical. And I think it's looking really at a national and a local level. There are the big discussions. There's the just energy transition that we speak about a lot. And what that means is really reducing carbon emissions. It means reskilling people in the coal industry, for example, to maintain livelihoods. Let's not forget that's critical as well for children, because these people will have children, and they need to have livelihoods as well. So there are many sort of aspects and many angles to this, but it's also about local action. Children and young people at a local level involved, doing community action, which could mean beach cleanups, it could mean recycling, it could mean even UNICEF is working on a water monitoring project where young people can monitor rivers, for example. What is the pollution level? How do you feed that back into government systems? So there's a number of elements there, because even at the local level, those elements can really benefit both mental and physical lifestyles even of young people in the community as a whole, to feel better at that local level while these other negotiations go on. So it can't be one or the other. It has to really come from both levels.
When you're talking about local action and, sometimes it's done in the form of school projects, let's talk about, the ways in which, the talk of climate change can be introduced in schools. And are you of the view that perhaps this should form, maybe part of the curriculum, because it's obviously a very important issue?
Yeah, absolutely. Climate change within the schooling system, within education, it is critical. And we have been talking with the Department of Basic Education, and they're working very hard to include climate lessons within life skills, for example, to look at how can we discuss climate issues within life skills lessons, and then hopefully to build it even more into the curriculum as we move forward. It's also about working with schools, working with principals to see how can we make schools safer, and how can they adapt to climate-related issues. So, for example, we were speaking with a school teacher from KwaZulu-Natal, a school that was affected during the the flooding. And she spoke about simple actions where you can, for example, keep drainage clean, keep it clear so that if there is flooding or heavy rain, it doesn't have as much of an impact on the school. And it's actions like that where she formed a committee at the school level among children to both educate themselves, to raise awareness, but also to do actions at this school.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue, though, is big business, big companies that are causing the biggest problem. So, yes, we can talk about the small actions, the simple actions, as you mentioned. But, you know, how much of a change or how much of an impact are those changes making? I mean, I was surprised to hear on a documentary, you know, people have been, you know, sort of selectively outraged about the issue of plastic straws, only to find out that it wasn't even causing that much of a dent to cancel out plastic straws. There were bigger issues. The fact that we have people dumping in the seas, companies dumping in the seas, big corporates really making a lot of damage. So yes, we can train the children and we can train people to do small things, but if we're not talking to those doing the bigger detriment to our planet, to the world, then really what is the point?
No, you're right. The big actions need to happen, and let's not forget that people are talking to them. The United Nations is talking to them. The Secretary General just spoke about it at the opening of COP27. But we do need commitments. We need action, and that involves reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That involves supporting corporates, supporting local communities where they're working, where the impact is. You know, areas of South Africa where the air pollution is particularly bad. You know, children are affected every day by that pollution. People are dying early because of heavy pollution. And that needs action, absolutely. And that's why COP27 is one of those moments where we hope there can be stronger commitments that have follow-up as well, accountability as well.
All right. Thanks very much for giving us your time there. Toby Fricker speaking to us on the back, of course, of COP27 holding its summit, of course, from today. Toby is the Chief of Communications at UNICEF South Africa.